So good afternoon, everyone. We're the WebMonkeys development team, and our project is the Automating Research Proposals project. This is Nate Odermatt, who's our team lead, and Jesse Martin, our design lead, Brian Mitchell, who's our QA lead, and I'm David Greninger, and I'm the technical writing lead for this project. So our presentation this afternoon will include an introduction, which I'll briefly recap the project. Then Jesse will tell you about the architecture of the solution we've developed to the problem we're trying to solve. Nate will tell you about the implementation, and then they'll give a demonstration together. And Brian will tell you about our QA and testing procedures. Our client is Dr. Samuel Odom, and he's an assistant professor in the Department of Finance. Looks like he's not with us this evening. He's also a member of the Faculty Research and Development Committee, and this is the ultimate client for whom we're developing our project. Our faculty advisor is Dr. Ed Gellenbeck, whom I'm sure you all know here in the Computer Science Department. So to sort of recap the problem and what we were trying to solve, the problem we were trying to solve and the solution that we settled on, the Faculty Research and Development Committee administers a number of different kinds of grants that are available to the university committee and our university community. Applying for these grants involves filling out a form and providing a document that describes the proposal that the submitter is making, for which the submitter wishes to receive a grant. At the moment, this whole process is paper-based. The submitter fills out the forms and submits the document to the committee. And they have to be duplicated. These documents have to be duplicated and given to each committee member. The committee members, in turn, write comments on various aspects of the proposal. And then they meet to discuss and decide the outcome, which one of the proposals will receive grants. And these, the paper copies have to be collected and filed. We propose to replace this with an online system consisting of a web interface and a database and a controller that involves modules of code that link the two and transfer information back and forth. The requirements of this system that we identified are that it has to provide a way of setting up accounts for different classes of users. And it has to allow them to log on once their accounts are set up. It has to grant users different access levels, depending on whether they're people submitting proposals, in which case they should only have access to their own information, or members of the committee who should have access to all proposals that have been submitted, or the committee chairman who should have access not only to the proposals but also to the comments made by the individual committee members. In addition, the system has to, of course, allow people to submit proposals and to fill out the various fields of the forms that are required as part of the application for these proposals. And it has to allow them to upload a file containing the proposal description. The system has to allow members of the Faculty Research and Development Committee to review these proposals, and it has to allow them to insert comments about various aspects of the proposals. Finally, it has to allow the committee chairman to review the proposals themselves and the comments. And the committee chairman usually prepares a letter to the applicant giving a statement of resolution whether the proposal is going to receive a grant or not and why. And this letter has to be uploadable as well. To develop this solution, we decided on an agile development model. And we divided it into 4 iterations, one of which was last quarter. 3 of them are this quarter, and we've just finished off the 2nd iteration. So to recap what we did in the first iteration. The first iteration was about getting the infrastructure, the foundation of the project in place. And this involved things like getting space on the CWU server, and more difficult than it sounds issue of getting permissions to upload files to the university server. In addition, we set up the account aspects of the database and the authentication, and set up the sort of the foundations of the database on which it would be built. Iteration 2 was all about the submission process, and Jesse and Nate will give you more information about that. But it was dealing with implementing all aspects of the submission process itself. Iteration 3, which is yet to come, is about enabling the review process for committee members. And in Iteration 4, we'll add some number of administrator functions, and we'll tie up loose ends and polish the project and the documentation involved with it. So Jesse will now tell you about the architecture of our solution.
Okay, so the architecture and design of our project consists of several elements, some of which communicate with each other. First of all, we have around 10 viewable pages. These pages are PHP-generated HTML and CSS files that the end user actually interacts with. The end users being submitters, committee members, and even the committee chair. Then we also have intermediate code, and this code is mainly PHP and JavaScript functions. These functions, such as ones that operate on post data to check it for validation, also for functions that repopulate forms. We have function for string manipulation and for evaluation of regular expressions, which is used also in post-data validation. These intermediate functions are called on the viewable pages, and upon completion they return a result that in some way alters the viewable content for the end user. Then we also have functions with the sole purpose of interacting with the database. So these functions add new content to the database or retrieve specific results from it. All of the database-related functions are stored in a file called the database API.php. I'll talk more about that later. The database itself stores all information pertaining to user accounts, submitted proposals, and authentication codes for committee members, and also for proposals themselves. In Iteration 3, we'll also be adding into the database support for comments from committee members. So by analyzing the necessary and potential interactions between these components, we were able to design and implement basic architecture for this project. By looking at the viewable pages, we could consider them part of a view group, and most of these pages actually do need to interact with the database, but lots of the times they are executing similar or repeated functionality. So we decided to kind of create an abstract data access layer in between those. In doing so, a model view controller architecture was established. As I mentioned previously, the view element consists of multiple files that the user interacts with. And these are written in PHP, and they depend on functions that are found within the controller group. The controller group consists of two files as of now. It consists of API.php, which interacts solely with the database for all database calls, and it also consists of functions.php. Now functions, those have the helper functions, input validation, form repopulation, and other functions of that nature. That interacts with the model, which in our case is just a MySQL database on a university server, and only the API is able to access the model. So as a result of this, problems with our database are extremely easy to diagnose because we know exactly where to look for them if they arise. Also, our project is more modular. The files are more decoupled in general. And it makes our application more potentially portable. For example, if we want to switch our database to a different server, it's fairly easy to do so by just editing the the database connection functions inside the API, and that's the only place that we'd have to change it. In addition, we would, in functions.php, since we are pulling out kind of the repeated functionality that would be present on multiple view pages, we're embracing the drive principle, which is to do not repeat yourself. So eliminating redundancy of code, and that also makes upkeep of our program a lot easier. Pages in the view never actually directly access the model, and this gives us a few benefits. One is that details of the model itself aren't actually exposed to the viewable pages, so our application is a little bit more secure in that aspect. And as I mentioned before, it creates more loose coupling between all our files. Now we'll talk a little bit about the database itself. As of now, we have 3 tables in the database. We have the committee code table. This table is used solely for the generation of, or the comparison of committee codes used in the registration process. So if you're a committee member and you want to register, you are required to have a special activation code that is sent to you via email from the committee chair in order to create an account. So on the registration page, you will enter that code, and it will be checked against the committee code database with your username. If it's successful, it allows you to create the account. Otherwise, it will return an error. Then there's the login table, and this really handles everything related to users. So you'll have like a username, first name, last name, an encrypted password, and user type as well. User type is used to designate if the user is a submitter or a committee member or a committee chair member or potentially an admin for iteration support. The last table that we have implemented currently is the proposals table, and that stores all of the information that's inputted by the submitter when they go to submit a proposal application. So all the fields on there are actually stored in this table. Some of the more notable, or one of the more notable ones is the author account. That is actually linked to the login's username field. The way we actually implement this is using a session. So when the user successfully logs in, a session is created and their session username variable is set to that of their username. Then if they want to view specific information for that user, like for example, if a user wants to see the proposals that he has submitted already, that is done on the submit page by using the session variable to call a function in api.php that will return the proposals that that username has submitted, or author account, I guess it's called for proposals. Also, the last name and first name are common to the login table and are generated dynamically when you create or when you submit a proposal application. That about wraps up the database schema. Now Nate is going to talk next.
Thanks, Jesse. So I'm going to talk about the implementation that we used for this iteration. Like David mentioned before, this second iteration was solely focused on the submitter themselves, so those that are submitting the proposal. So once the account is created, the submitter will see a home page, and then that will give them access to be able to fill out a proposal with certain information that is required, and they can also select a type of proposal that they would like to submit. They're also then able to, like I was mentioned before, upload a file that will go along with their form, and this file is error checked that that their user will be allowed to upload a doc file, a docx file, or a PDF, and this was based on a requirement from our client. These files will be supported. And then once they have done that, they'll be able to view the proposals that they have submitted. We just touched a little bit on the committee members, where we were just going to allow them to just right now view a list of proposals that have been submitted, so they'll be able to see all the proposals. The environment that we used for this iteration is the same that we used for our first one, is that we do have a computer in 204 that is designated and set aside for us to put all of our code on, and is also connected to the CW server. And it also has phpMyAdmin, so we can communicate with the database. As far as the stats of our second iteration, is we do successfully port all of our code over to the server and test it to make sure it is running properly. We feel that we have completed iteration 2 100%, and we have started iteration 3. We have about 2,100 lines of PHP code, and this is excluding any test code that we have written. We have 322 lines of JavaScript code, and that is excluding the framework. We have about 20 PHP files and 8 to 10 viewable web pages. We have made 157 commits to our repository at this point in time. So we're going to go ahead and show you a demo of our second iteration. So you can see here that this is the login page, and like I was mentioned earlier before, the login was taken care of in the first iteration. So once someone registers, they can log in, they'll be directed back to the login page. And once they log in, they'll see this is the submission homepage. So as you can see, there's a couple links here. The first link that is on here is for a list of instructions in case the submitter is a first-time user. So this just goes through and tells them exactly what they need to do to submit a proposal. As you can see, it's quite lengthy, but they have to make sure that they know what they need to do to submit. And there is a button at the bottom that allows them to go back to the submitter homepage. The second link that we have here is the link that they can click on that will actually bring up the form that they need to submit. And we're going to just fill in some fields here and let you see what this does. There is a drop-down box that they can select that, like I mentioned, will give them the type of proposals that they can submit. And then other required information that is needed to submit the proposal. There are certain sections of this form that are only required for a certain proposal. So they don't have to fill out all the fields if they're not submitting that type of proposal that requires all of them. At the bottom of the page there, you can see that there is a button that they can click, that they can browse to where they save their file that they would like to upload with it that explains the description of why they're applying for that certain proposal. And if we hit the submit button, we didn't fill out all the fields, and you see that it is being error checked to make sure that those fields are being filled in properly. So our next tab we have up is we've actually already filled in all the fields required for a certain proposal, and we've already uploaded the file. So once Jesse hits submit there, it'll take him to a successful, or a kind of a confirmation page. That'll let the submitter know that they have successfully submitted a proposal along with uploading the file, and there is a link there that they can click to get back to the home page, which, as you can see there, also it does give them a list of proposals that they have submitted. There are viewable links that they can view the form. So, and this form is set to read only, so that way they can't go in and none of the information can be tampered with. The other link that was on there gives them the opportunity to view the file that they have uploaded with the proposal as well. And that'll just pop up as the type of document that they uploaded it as. Our last tab that we have up here is our committee page. So like we mentioned, the committee will be dealt with in the third iteration, but right now you can see a link, or a list, of all the proposals that have been submitted by all the submitters. So and again, the links are the same for this page. They can view the form, again, which is read-only, and also the file that was been uploaded. So that's it for our demonstration. I'll turn the time over to Brian for quality assurance and testing.
Thank you, Nate. Okay, this iteration we did numerous forms of testing to ensure the quality is correct for our client. The first is unit testing. What we did, we used simple test to test our PHP functions, and then used web validation to check the HTML code that was correct. After that, we did also numerous white box and black box testing, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. Our next one is system testing. Because we have the server available to use, we can actually upload our website and test it on the server that it works properly. And the most important test that we did this iteration was the acceptance testing with our client. He was very pleased with what we have done, and in the next slide we can see exactly our acceptance test. We just basically had passed or failed, and then any kind of comment our client had, for that matter. And the next one as well. and then he would just sign it off, which will also put it into our report. And the last thing that we did, we track bugs using Jira. And every member basically they can submit a bug report, and then someone else can go in, fix that bug, and then write any comments what was wrong. So in case something like this happens again, we can go into Jira and check how we fixed that. And that's basically what we have on bug reports and testing for this iteration. I'll turn it over to Nate to conclude and to open up the floor for questions.
All right, so in conclusion, like I mentioned before, we feel we have completed iteration 2 100%. We have started iteration 3, which will be a 3-week process, and we'll again, like Brian mentioned, we'll do an acceptance test with Dr. Odom when that is complete. Some reflections that we have on this iteration is to do more unit testing more frequently, and also to track the bugs more rapidly as well, so we don't have to spend a lot of time on fixing those bugs, and they be taken care of quickly. We are confident at this point in time that we can finish a deliverable product to our client, and that he will be pleased with it. And now we open the floor for any questions that anyone might have.
Have you guys considered just hiding or showing portions of that form based on the proposal, the selected proposal?
We even actually brought that up to our client, and since the form itself originally was paper-based, he said it really wasn't that big of a requirement to hide those fields that weren't required, since there are little parentheses next to those titles that say they are only required for a certain proposal.
This is something we'll bring up again when we're in the polishing phase.
Good.
Because I'm not being facetious about that. It's not a very high priority item, so we prioritize things. And we're making lists of things that we want to bring up again about wouldn't it be nice if we did this when we're in the last iteration. But our goal is to get a really good core functionality for the program in place before we polish it.
Chris?
Yeah. Did you run into any limitations or missing PHP functions when trying to use the school's web server?
It's hard to hear you up here.
Did you run into any limitations or missing PHP modules when you try to use the school's web server?
No, we have not yet. I thought that I had run into one when using an upload handler, when using a PHP built-in move file function, but that was actually not caused by lack of support from it on the university server. It was caused by a permissions issue on our upload folder itself. But yeah, other than that minor glitch, we haven't had any problems with PHP libraries being missing on the university server, so we're pretty lucky in that aspect.
We should also say we were forewarned about that issue, so we've been fairly conservative about calling this.
Specifically, I was curious about what MySQL modular functions you use to access the database.
We're just using standard MySQL execute query calls. And we haven't had any issues with that.
Okay.
How are the committee codes generated? Discuss that.
Oh, the committee codes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a function that takes first of all, it's called generate committee code. When the committee chair visits a website page, he's presented a list of, or a text area. He's able to enter a list of email addresses of potential committee members that he wants to invite to be on the committee. That list is then parsed. First of all, it's validated to make sure that they're in the correct format of email addresses. Then they're stored in an array, and the array is iterated over. For each email address, then a call is made to create a code for that person. And the code creation function involves a timestamp using milliseconds as a seed. And it actually, I think that's plugged into an MD5 algorithm that will generate just a random string of characters. And then we store that in the committee code database, as well as in the next iteration, or perhaps iteration 4, that code will also be part of an email script, so it will email each committee member their code and a little message saying they've been invited to the program. But the emailing functionality is not yet in place. All of the other functionality is.
The other thing, so a person can only submit a grant once, they can only put a proposal in once, and then that's it.
Well, they can put in multiple proposals.
You can,
Yeah.
okay. You said there's read-only after that.
Well, if say the committee goes through and they say they submitter missed a portion or needed more information, we discuss this with our client, they have to pretty much, resubmit another proposal, and it gets viewed as a new proposal. So the one that they made mistakes on kind of gets disregarded.
So if a person submits and they realizes they've got something before the deadline, they can still resubmit.
Yes, they resubmit the whole new form again.
And then it just overwrites the previous one.
Yeah, there was the client did not want people to be able to alter their proposals. He wanted the submission to be sort of a formal turning the matter over to the committee.
On your database, in the proposals table, you have first name and last name. You also have first name and last name in the login. You also have in the login a login ID. Why not do the link on login ID and just look up first name and last name? And that would follow your drive proposal for the principal.
That's essentially what we're doing. Originally, we wanted first name and last name to be in the proposal table itself because there is a field for a signature on the proposal submission form. So we want to be able to check that to the first and last name of the person who is logged in via the login table. So that's the reason we have those fields there. I guess they're not entirely necessary to be in there because they don't need to be stored after the check is made. But yeah, that could be a change that we can make.
Right, just do a look at. There's no need to store first and last name twice.
Right.
So can I throw in something about Dr. Anvik's question too that I forgot to mention? Because the client didn't want the proposals alterable after they had been submitted, that was the reason that we have validation that checks for any missing fields and validates the information. I mean, it would have been desirable in any case, but it became absolutely essential that people didn't hit that submit button and submit something without having included the required information for the proposal.
Yeah, maybe this is in the polish stage, but I noticed like a lack of navigation. You guys like a centralized navigation bar or something?
That's what we're going to implement this next iteration. We actually talked about it already, having that navigation bar and having it different for every user. Like, it's just a dynamic, it pulls the information, what kind of user is in there right now, and then it will display the navigation bar.
Thank you.
Chris, did you consider like inlining I mean, you showed quite a long detailed instruction page. Did you consider inlining the instructions into a user type interface where each piece of information or group of information would include the relevant instructions on that page?
No, we didn't. So we just threw it on there, just sort of, yeah.
Our client didn't specify that. At first it seemed like he just wanted that whole cover page as it is, not broken up or anything.
Yeah, originally now when you go to the old system and you print off a proposal, it's 8 pages. And half of that is the instructions. So, but yeah, that's something we probably could do. So that way it's just already up there.
We actually did toss around very briefly the idea of putting it maybe in bubble help or something, but not at this point in the development cycle.
All right, we'll have to cut it off there.
Okay. Thank you.